Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. So, the Bad Batch released episode 6 this past Friday, and we're going to talk about it right now.
You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. And we got Ronaldo with us, so what's up, Ronaldo?
Ronaldo.
It's always good. We missed you on Friday, man. We had a really good discussion. And speaking of Friday, if you didn't have a chance to see our Friday show, make sure you go back and catch it, because we talked about George Lucas possibly coming back to the franchise. But that being said, let's focus on Dave Filoni and his creation. So this week, well, actually Friday, we got the latest episode of The Bad Batch titled Decommissioned. It was the 6th episode in the series. And overall, I got to say, I really enjoyed this episode. If I'm just going to give my overall blanket thoughts, I really enjoyed the episode. I thought it was a balanced episode. I thought it had some really good comedy. I thought it had a little bit of drama in it that I thought was cool. And it had some foreshadowing. It had a few cameos and some Easter eggs. So overall, I'd say it was a pretty balanced, good, strong episode. What do you think?
Hey man, I couldn't say it better myself, man. I mean, it was really awesome. I really enjoyed the show. The surprise of the characters that popped up was kind of cool. I was like, I wasn't expecting that one, but it was kind of cool, and I could see kind of like the tie-in to some things too. Definitely left us with some more mystery, especially the way it ended. I really like the growth of Omega in this, and yeah, man, I think it was a really awesome episode.
Yeah, so I mean, when you walk into it, I mean, the thing that's pretty cool about this thing is that one of the things that makes Bad Batch unique is the fact that it has a lot of lighthearted moments. That's what I got out of it right away. I thought, wow, there's actually a lot of lighthearted moments, and in what is becoming a tradition in this show, they actually kick it off with somewhat of a lighthearted moment.
Yeah, definitely. With Omega trying to, learn how to use her new toy, her new weapon.
Yeah, last
so
time
now
it was a comm, now it's a,
Right,
like a laser bow.
Yeah. And I was thinking, like, I wonder what's more powerful, that or Chewbacca's bowcaster. But of course, I already know the answer to that. I mean, that bowcaster is, yeah, no joke.
I don't know,
Besides
though,
being
man.
like
That thing did pack some punch, though.
yeah,
When
don't get
Sid
me
started
wrong,
firing off at it, and then just some of the other stuff, I mean, that thing seemed like it was pretty powerful to me.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, like, when you see somebody get hit with a bowcaster and they go like flying off screen.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
All right.
yes.
Well, and that's because the bow. See, and this is what I really liked about this is the fact that this weapon that Omega was using was a little bit more comparable to a longbow, whereas Chewbacca's bowcaster is more like a crossbow. So I thought it was kind of cool that they actually showed us more of a longbow style laser weapon that I had always wondered if they had one of those in the Star Wars universe, because you see the bowcaster, and again, this is like back right out the gate in 77. It just stands to reason that they would have some sort of a longbow type of a thing, but it was finally cool to see that weapon, even though I know it has been featured before. I think this is the time that it's been the most prominently featured, though, and I thought that it was really cool that, once again, it's more of a lighthearted moment. They're talking amongst themselves. You're actually getting to see a little bit of character development. It isn't just action and missions and, all these different really heavy character-based things.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that was a cool thing too. Just watching Echo, trying to instruct her on how to, use it and how you need to have practice, and just really becoming formidable with this particular weapon. And then of course see it, just coming out and just basically showing like, no, this is what you could really do with this thing, and just start letting those things fly. And you're just like, whoa, all right.
And I think the other thing that was cool too is the fact that they basically are establishing kind of a home base for them.
Yeah, this seems like to be that little hold up.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect them to still be there, honestly.
I know. I was actually kind of surprised too. Now, I did expect Sid to return, but I did not expect to see her character return this quickly.
Right.
But it was kind of neat to see them. They now have like a little home base that they have, and they can talk about some of the greater things in the universe. I always like it. I don't know. I love movies. I love stuff like that where you have a definitive home base like that. And it's not even in action movies and stuff like that. I mean, even if you go to comedies, like you and I both love Frasier. And Frasier's apartment sort of serves as that central gathering place. And it's kind of like a home base, and there's like a comfort to it. And especially in crime dramas, I really love it because it's almost like it's safe. And one of the story devices that they like to use is that in the third act of the movie, usually the antagonist ends up invading or somehow violating,
breaching,
or breaching that space. And so I think that that's a really cool thing. And obviously, Sid's place is more like their home base, and it's a place where they can talk. You can see some more character development. Because one of the things that really impresses me about Omega, and this is a good time to bring this up, because her learning to use its bow is a perfect example. Her learning to use the comm. She has, to me, and this is going directly out to people who complain about her character, because one of the things I really like about her character and the way that it's written is she has this perfect balance of competence and naivete. You know, she's kind of naive about things, and she's a little bit inexperienced in certain things. But at the same time, she's also competent with what she does know and what she can do. And so they don't overpower her or anything like that, or, you know, everything that she does, she picks it up and all of a sudden she's a master at it. And I think that that was the problem that they had with a character like, say, Rey, is the fact that even though there are in-universe explanations for this, it's like if you actually take that character and you look at her over the trilogy, there really isn't a whole lot of growth because she already starts out pretty powerful. Whereas with Omega, and really it would probably be more fair to compare Omega to Ahsoka. Ahsoka has somewhat that same balance too, because she's doing a lot of stuff in that first episode of the Clone Wars. But I think the reason why Ahsoka turned people off was because she was almost over the top about it. I think that there's an organic, earthy, more grounded element to the way that Omega is presented versus the way that some of these other characters have presented. I think they're more relatable, actually.
Yeah. Omega, and I think that's because we know Omega has abilities, but we don't know what they are. You know, and that's the cool thing about it, because with Ahsoka, you already know, like, all right, you know, she's a Padawan, so she knows how to use the Force to some degree, you know, and all that. But Omega she's like learning everything from scratch, not just her abilities, but just what the world looks like everything. Like she's learning. It's like you're looking through the eyes of you are looking at the world through the eyes of a child, and you're trying to explain things, and it puts you kind of in that world of, man, if I had a kid, or you do have kids, you know, now you remember what those moments were like. Oh, this is an elephant, and this is a puppy, and that's a bird, and you know, and it's like it seems so common, but well, yeah, and you know, for her, she doesn't know. She's just kind of like, oh, okay, you know, and so it's refreshing to kind of see that. But I've also seen, like, you know, her growth where she's still kind of in that, like, okay, she wants to be a part, she wants to do something, but you're starting to see that she's learning to kind of somewhat stay put. Like, at least in this episode, she was trying to stay put, and then a situation happened where she was just like, well, I'm closer, and I'm just going to take action, you know, and just do my thing. And she was actually, you know, she did pretty well at first until, you know,
and I'm glad
she got a little gun shy.
I am really glad that you brought that up, because one of the things that I think was really, really interesting about this particular episode is that it did break a little bit that mold of, the kid's told to stay put, but of course they have to get into the action. Now, I did think in The Phantom Menace, though, I thought they had a clever workaround for that, even though it did annoy me to no end. But it was one of those things that they hid Anakin in a ship, and it's kind of like he accidentally presses some buttons, and then it wasn't like he was trying to do anything. He was actually trying to get control back, and then eventually it was just like, well, you know what? We might as well just go with this, right? But yeah, Omega was actually, they kind of did a flip-flop on this. She was trying to stay put. She was trying to be cool and do things. And what I think was cool about this too, which is it's piggybacking off of your point, is that they didn't just do the cliche, okay, wait here while we go do whatever. They gave her a job. It's like, okay, you be a lookout and you look out and see if you can spot the target or whatever. Which in this case, this is a good time to bring it up too. They were trying to find a tactical droid. They were trying to find a droid that basically was sort of, they were sort of those commanders. They featured them actually fairly heavy in the Clone Wars series.
Actually with Admiral Trench actually had one of those with him at all time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember who it was, but yeah. And basically what it was a droid that then commanded probably like a battalion or greater of battle droids of all kinds. And so they were trying to locate this thing because they were going to bring it back and get information off of it or something. It was another thing that Sid sent him out. And that's another thing that I really like about this too, is that you have Sid basically sending them out on missions. And I think that that's a really cool way. Not only are we going to see the Empire and see the state of the galaxy through the eyes of the Bad Batch, but the way that they're going to accomplish this is we're going to actually see this through a series of missions that they're going to go on. And so it really becomes almost like a quest-based game type of a thing that you would play on a computer or whatever. But I really like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really cool because, you have this whole kind of question that Sid's kind of sending him on. And, this was really cool because, of what the tactical droid does. And it's like, okay, well, the tactical droid kind of adapts to, situations. They kind of see how they kind of counterattack based on what you give them. And so they've accrued a bunch of knowledge inside their circuit. So that's like, yeah, one of those things could be very useful to somebody because now you have all these different, battle blueprints basically for particular groups. And, this particular person commissioned it. And that's the thing about the Bad Batch. They're mercenaries. They don't care about who wants it or what they want it for. They just like, okay, here's the money. We'll just go get what you want. And that's it.
Well, and I have to say that in this case, they're really between a rock and a hard place, so to speak, because what choice do they really have? They can't really go out and make any kind of money. They need money in order to be able to do what they need to do, but they can't necessarily go out and make any because every planet's been alerted to their ship. There's no jobs they could really take unless they were criminal jobs, and that really wouldn't sit well with them, at least at this point. And so Sid, being somebody who previously worked with the Jedi, I think provides a really good quid pro quo thing here. Let me just get to one thing. Ronaldo basically says, the episode was great. I thought both sisters, and we're going to get to them soon, were going to be annoying because I didn't like them in Clone Wars, but I think they were better used. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up now was because I think overall, starting with the Bad Batch themselves, versus the way they were used in the Clone Wars, or the character of Omega as compared to some of the other characters like her, like an Ezra, like an Ahsoka, even a Grogu, to a certain degree. I think they're using these characters a little bit better in this particular show than they have in other shows. And this is happening right out the gate, too, because we're only 6 episodes in. Other people could probably comment and say, well, but they did X, Y, and Z or whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, they did that over multiple seasons. You're looking at it from a hindsight point of view where we're only now starting this show. First of all, we don't really know how many seasons it's going to go. But even if it only went one, we're only maybe halfway or just a touch over
Mhm.
halfway into this thing. And already they've established that.
Yeah, I mean, this particular show is really cool because, like I said, it gives you some of everything. It gives you, like you said, it's very well balanced. With the levity and then the drama and everything like that. And one of the things I really do love is like the development of like some of the main characters. Um, Omega, of course, Hunter, be another one. Even Wrecker, you can kind of see bits of growth in him. And so, it's really cool just to kind of have, um, like I said, just that growth. Now, as to what Nardo was saying, about the two sisters, I thought they were really used well in this. Um, I like the connection that they kind of, and I think we won't see the last of them, obviously because of how kind of things are panning out. But I think I like the fact how they're kind of bridging those gaps and pulling from Rebels or pulling from Clone Wars and like showing us how like these people run across each other. And it's because it's funny because you never really think about that. But it's like, yeah, these people have had to run across each other at some point.
Yeah,
It's because they're in the same kind of line of work. You know what I'm saying?
and I mean, I should bring this up. So basically, it's the Martez sisters. I remember Rafa and Trace were their first names.
Rafa and Trace. Yep.
Yeah, Martez, I think. So they were first introduced in the final season of the Clone Wars. And there was a pretty big story arc with them, actually, because that was when Ahsoka ends up down in the 1313 level, basically the underbelly of Coruscant, and they meet up with her, and she pretty much restores some hope to them. And then there's a little bit, I mean, there was some back and forth. They were basically smugglers. I wouldn't really call them pirates. I wouldn't even necessarily call them smugglers. They were just common criminals, basically. They were just trying to make their way any way they knew how, kind of like street kids. And it was surprising to see them pop up in this episode, but like you said, this was definitely the perfect time to bring them in, if you're going to bring them in, because it made perfect sense. And that's another thing I really like about this show, is that they're not bringing people in that don't make sense. I'm part of a Facebook group of the Cobra Kai series. And all these fans, all they talk about is, oh, let's bring in this one, let's bring in that character, and when are they going to do this? And it's like, it's not about how many characters you can shoehorn into a series just to give them another appearance. Does it make sense for the story, and do you actually need something? And compelling storytelling, that's what actually should drive what characters are brought in and what aren't. Now, the Martez sisters are not characters that I necessarily would have thought of to bring in, but I have to say it's a stroke of brilliance. And much like what Ronaldo said, much like what you've been saying, they did kind of annoy me in the Clone Wars. Like, I thought they were okay, but they were that typical, hard-edged street kid that has to learn to be a little, it was kind of like that common theme that you always see, but I really love the way that they were used in this episode.
Well, and this is the cool thing. Once again, I look at the Bad Batch. This whole, and I'm getting a general theme. It's really a show about growth on all levels, from all the characters, from even the Empire. Like, it's a growing empire. They're trying to figure out how to make the Empire better and stronger. And do we go with stormtroopers or clone troopers? And so you have stuff like that. You have the growth of Clone Force 99, where they're dealing with their own situation, being defunct clones, and then on top, now you're adding Omega into the mix, and now they're kind of like surrogate fathers / uncles. And then you have Omega, who's like completely just enamored with these guys and wants to feel a part of something. So she's trying to grow herself faster so she can be more like them. But then you also bring in some more characters, like with the Martinez sisters, where we've seen their growth on season 7 of Clone Wars, but you can see that even in this, how Rafa is still kind of like, okay, I don't trust people. I
Hmm.
don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's that whole thing that she's carrying with her, but people kind of restore that sense of hope in her, like, okay, well, everybody's not bad and everybody's not like this. Maybe and you see the thing of growth in all these different people. And that's what's really cool about, the Bad Batch, is that what it's really showing is like the growth on every level.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think is really cool, and the growth is also intertwined. And
Right.
so as the episode is progressing, obviously Omega gets into a little bit of trouble and
Hmm.
ends up falling on a conveyor belt in this droid factory. And these police droids are coming. They end up having to rescue her, and then of course, then they have to fight out the police droids, and that's when they basically get this commander droid thing to they reprogram it, allow it to
Hmm.
basically tell the battle droids that are still on this conveyor belt thing or whatever to start attacking, and then you basically we'll get to the ending in a little bit. But one of the things that I liked was there's a couple of things that I thought were noteworthy. First of all, the Martez sisters were not they were out for themselves, but when Omega was in trouble, they actually went to help her. And I thought
Well,
that
yeah, at
kind of
least
plays
Trace
into the
did.
growth thing.
Yeah, I mean, Trace has always been that way. She's kind of the more
Yeah.
softer one. Rafa's, of course, the more hard edge one.
Hmm.
Um, because even when they met Ahsoka, that was the same way. She was all trying to like help her fix her speeder bike and everything, just being a good person. And Rafa's kind of seen the worst in people because she's older. She's kind of seen like, all right, you can't trust everybody. You only could trust the people who are really close to you, and that's it. Everybody else, you kind of have to watch your back for. And
Yeah.
so when you can see that now, and even in this, and I think what was cool in this is that they both saw something of themselves
Hmm.
in Omega. They kind of saw like, here's this girl who's, and it kind of had that girl power thing to it a little bit. But I think it was more so I can see, and they began to care about her because they saw that, she's just a kid who's just trying to, just like how they were, you know, and
Well,
but
they're
she
also looking at the
has a group of
dynamics
people to help
between her
him.
and the clones too, right?
Yep.
So I
Yeah,
mean,
it's a family type thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
and that's
and that's what they
probably
want.
not something that she's used to seeing out of clones. And they
Right.
alluded to that. Well, you guys are
Hmm.
supposed to be and that's one of the things that I thought was really cool about this is that part of that growth process that all these characters seem to be facing is that they're also breaking down a lot of stereotypes that they had about each other during the Clone Wars. Because that's part of the aftermath. That's one of the reasons why I thought it was really brilliant that they actually are exploring deeply, much deeper than I thought,
Hmm.
what's happening once the Empire takes over. Because again, this is a very under utilized, or it hasn't been covered in too many things. I mean, some of the comics and books may have actually glossed over it a little bit, but you haven't really gotten anything that takes place immediately after episode 3 where you can explore some of these. And at first, I was disappointed, like I said, when the Bad Batch was announced, because I was like, really? These guys? I don't know if I want to explore this new, vast, rich version of the Star Wars universe through these guys. But now I've come to find out, after seeing, really, right from the first episode, that these guys are the perfect narrators for this time
Hmm.
period. Because they're part of
Sure.
that old Republic thing. Well, not old Republic, but the
Yeah.
Republic versus the
The previous
Empire.
Republic. Yeah.
Exactly. They're part of that whole system. And being soldiers, they were taken care of, they were revered, they were respected,
Hmm.
they had the
No.
camaraderie with each other.
Well, I mean, that's and that's a good point. Is that yes, they had all that thing, all that stuff for them in the Republic era, and then now in this new empire is kind of like no place for them.
Yeah.
Even there's kind of like even for the regular clones, who are following things, but even more so for these guys who don't follow the directions.
Well,
You
not only
know.
that, but now you got the clones are infighting with each other basically, and they're starting to form
Hmm.
prejudices, and there's a little bit of societal issues are now creeping into this perfect clone army that you once had. And then you're starting to see more and more distrust. You're starting to see crime rise because there's that sort of that in between period. Even though we see it as the viewer, it's an immediate transition from the Republic to the Empire. But the citizens are just starting to try this on. They don't really know what this is like. And now they're finding out, oh, now we got to have these numbers in order to travel. And
Hmm.
it kind of reminds you of the whole Nazis when at first those guys were revered as heroes because the economy and everything turned around. But it's like, yeah, well, we just need you to get this and we just need you to do that. And little by little, your freedoms are being somewhat boxed in. And that's what the Star Wars universe during this time period is experiencing. It's like you're trading a little bit of your freedom for that security and that safety. And
Yeah.
there's people on the outer fringes that are like, well, wait a second. You guys do notice that this isn't right, right? And the clones are the
Yeah.
perfect narration because they were part of that past, and they're the first ones that are going to see it because they're sort of seeing it on the inside.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you kind of come from a regime where, you're uh it's no different than like, any other job, right? You've been with the employer for so long, then that employer decides to retire or go somewhere else and then a new boss comes in and now they want to change everything. And now everybody's kind of like, well, what do you think was going to happen? Like, well, before we could do this, now we can't. And so now, you have that angst that's always kind of there. And then this new regime is looking for you right now. Fennec Shan's already, been summoned to, take him out. And
Mm-hmm.
so now you're kind of feeling the weight of that. Then of course, you still got this child that you're trying to basically raise, you know, and then you're still trying to, just trying to survive and do your own thing when your own brothers have turned against you. There's a lot of drama in this,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think that's what a lot of people really, may not really truly understand that there's a lot going on right now with these guys. But yeah, like you said, even here in Rafa talk about the empire, about like, oh, well, isn't this what your new empire? And he's like, well, we don't follow the empire. We're not really a part of that, and this is kind of like, okay, well, you guys are kind of different, but so it's really cool just to kind of, like you said, see how the galaxy is viewing this new empire from all different sides, from a smuggler standpoint, from former clones, from just regular citizens. Then you got, all these other people, smugglers and drug dealers and arms dealers and whoever else decides to show up in the show,
Well,
So
I
I
mean, the
think
thing that's
everybody's just
funny,
kind of like, all right,
I
this is
mean,
the
what's
new
so
world
funny,
now.
man, is like the whole time when you were saying that, I was imagining the employee conversations like, they're switching to stormtroopers now. Well, what's wrong with clone troopers? We've always done clone troopers. See, this is what happens when a new boss comes in. They gotta,
Yep.
because that's the
Want
kind
to
of
change the
thing.
uniform
Yep,
and,
change the exactly. It's like, well, what's wrong with the old ones? Why can't and
exactly. Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that happens in any kind of a change. And I'm sure there's going to be people that might watch this and go, "Wow, you guys are getting all this out of this little half-hour cartoon." Okay. But it's there though. I mean, it is there. If you actually, cuz I would flip that around on them. There's a lot of people that say, "Oh, well, this is just filler stuff." Or, "Oh, this is not really interesting," or, "I'm waiting for everything to start." And I'm like, "Everything to start? You guys don't even realize that how deep this show is really going." I mean, yes, you do have to look for it a little bit, but it's there.
Hmm. Oh yeah, definitely, and that's what's really cool about this is even watching, like I said, the growth of Omega. She's a little bit becoming a little bit more independent. Um, she was a little gun shy, and that's one of the things too. Like you watching her growth because she was like, oh, so happy about getting this weapon, but now she has to turn it and use it on someone, and now she's hesitant.
Right.
What I'm saying? Now she's looking at Rafa like, okay, do I let this go? How do I do this? And you know. she ends up getting bested, and so it just once again shows her that you know you're not there yet. You know, you're still got a
Right.
lot of ways to go. But you know, the comedy, like I said, that you know, when she's like, "Well, pick up a weapon." Well, I had a weapon. You know,
Yeah.
just little
I
stuff
thought
like
that was
that. You know,
cool. And the other thing was like, what was the other line? Like, what is there an echo here? And he's like, yeah,
oh
I'm
yeah,
here. And
yeah,
she was like, who are
yeah.
you? I'm Echo. It's like, it's stuff like that.
She's
I
like,
mean,
really?
yeah, and that's it. And what's funny is, because there's some people that would probably have that reaction to the joke, and she's almost saying it for them. Like, okay, really,
Yeah.
guys, seriously? And that's what I think is
Well,
just so brilliant about this show.
yeah. It kind of reminded me of that whole thing when they had I think we found on the internet when Luke was walking around. He's like R2, and then Pink Five was like, "I'm
Oh,
not."
yeah. Yeah. Like, I
He's really
am
calling
not.
for a
It's like
droid,
R2. Yeah, I know. I mean,
but it's
and that's the stuff that I think is pretty cool. Now, there are some things that I saw too that's a little bit foreshadowing. There's some stuff that is a little Easter eggy. Like a couple of things that jumped out to me was you saw R7. Now they didn't give the full name, and I forgot the full designation of the droid because it wouldn't be head to head unless I forgot something. But that was basically R7 was the designation of Ahsoka's droid, her navigation R2 unit. So it makes me wonder if maybe that's the same R7, if they just stuck with the sisters.
maybe.
That's just like a
Yeah,
little Easter eggy kind of thing, right? But the thing that was really fascinating to me is, of course, when Wrecker goes and he hits his head, and then he's on the ground for a little while, and he starts to say, a good soldier follows orders, which is kind of the same thing that Crosshair was repeating. And he kind of bounced back to his normal thing, but you can see once again that, like we've been saying on every episode of this show, there's definitely something to this.
And what do you think is going to happen if he actually somebody does flip that switch in him and he just turns against it? Because now you got Crosshair and Wrecker.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that I'm wondering, because on one hand, it would really be the cool story thing to do is if you did that, because now in essence the Bad Batch would kind of be broken up, right? It wouldn't be the same. So you'd have Wrecker and Crosshair on one side, and then you'd have, Hunter, Tech, and Echo on the other side, and of course Omega's with them too, but it can go in some very interesting directions. But the thing is, they sold this whole thing on the Bad Batch. And it kind of reminds me of something that Timothy Zahn had said in an article recently that I read. And it was interesting because his take on the sequel trilogy I really loved, because he was talking about it and he was saying, my biggest problem with the sequels is they were killing off a lot of the main heroes. And he was like, you could have achieved the same thing without killing them off. Because if you really look at Star Wars, it's not the type of saga where you kill off your main characters. He cited, if you're going to do that, then Lando should never have made it out of the second Death Star and stuff. The idea is it's not that they don't face challenges. They face these challenges. A lot of them are insurmountable, but they end up finding a way to come through them. And then you get this really feel-good type of thing. That's what Star Wars is all about. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, yes. Now, granted, I know that Rian Johnson, when he killed off Han Solo, he was trying, that one would be the only way where I'd be like, okay, I hated it.
Well, that
because
was JJ.
Yes, you're right. I'm so used to blaming Rian Johnson for everything. But you're right. That happened
JJ.
in The Force Awakens. But it was a good, I didn't like it, and ultimately I agree with Zahn on this, but at least they were trying to do like, Han Solo was playing the Obi-Wan role. And so much like Obi-Wan, he was killed. And okay, fine. But Timothy Zahn had a really good point about that. Is that that's the kind of thing the Star Wars saga is. And I'm afraid that if they did something with the Bad Batch where they split them up and they did something, it would take away from, even though you can do a lot of really cool story stuff in there, it would ultimately take away from other things that they could do that I think might be better served for the overall arc. I guess that makes sense.
I mean, that's like why everybody, of course, like hated. And once you get to the Last Jedi, when Ryan Johnson, killed off Luke, it's like, okay, I get you killing off Han. All right, we all knew Harrison Ford wanted that character to die anyway, so it's like it's not so unexpected. But
Yeah,
the whole
true.
Luke Skywalker thing, though, that was like a complete thing. Like, okay, now wait a minute. We waited all this time. We waited like 30 years for this thing, and then you give us Luke Skywalker. Then he chucks his lightsaber. He doesn't even fire the thing up.
He's like the most
the whole time.
like.
And then all of a sudden, all right, he has like one little moment, and then you kill him. It's like, what? Like, this is not what we signed up for, people. Like,
right.
No.
And see, that's what I don't want them to do with the Bad Batch. I don't want them to make that mistake, even though, because you can make that same argument about Luke that, oh yeah, but if you have Luke be all disillusioned and whatever, you can go into all these different story directions, which of course they didn't. But yes, on paper, that sounds like a good idea. It may not be what the fans want, but you can see that there's some directions they can go in that might actually be interesting.
But once again, you have Filoni who understands Star Wars and all its complexities, and so despite all of that, I think he's going to once again knock it out the park.
I hope so. Ronaldo basically says, "Do you think Wrecker will betray the team?" Yeah, and I
think he'll have moments. I think he'll probably have a moment where he got to, and I think, Tech and all them going to somebody's going to notice that something's off about him. And then they're going to they probably figure, oh, his chip has been activated or something like that. We're like, well, look, let's get this under control before he goes fully berserk, because then who's going to stop him?
Right. And we were talking about foreshadowing anyway, right? That was how this conversation began. And that's one of the things they somewhat foreshadowed a couple episodes ago, where Tech was working on some thing that's like an inhibitor for that chip, or something that reverses the inhibitor chip, or whatever it is. He was working on some sort of technology that would actually, reverse it.
Block the signal or something.
Yeah, block the signal. Jason's back with us. He says hello there. It's always good.
Hey, Jason.
But I think that ultimately, and that's the biggest issue, is that if they do the whole thing to where they do the Wrecker turns bad and teams up with Crosshair, again, it can give you some story arcs that might be cool. But at the same time, it might get a little bit away from what I think that the show was advertised as being. And it's almost like, well, you actually brought it up in a way, because we were promised with The Force Awakens that they were getting the band back together. You got Han, Luke, and Leia. You didn't have one scene with all three of them. And you only really technically had one movie with all three of them. And it's sort of like, it was disappointing. Now, granted, I admit, sure, you can actually come up with some really cool stories, but I really liked what Timothy Zahn was pointing out when he was talking about that. You have to remember the kind of thing that Star Wars is. And I'm all for turning Star Wars somewhat dark, don't get me wrong, but there's a limit, though. You have to stay with what it is. The other foreshadowing thing that they did, now we got to get to the end, because that was just kind of cool. So then, of course, the Martez sisters, they're back on their ship, and they're giving a report to a mysterious figure. Now, I just have to say, like, right out the gate, okay, I have to point this out. It's cool. And I don't know how you feel about this, but now I'm getting a little bit burnt out on the we're talking to a mysterious figure thing. They're doing this too much.
Who do you think it is?
So there are a lot of theories floating around out there. But I think I'm leaning towards Bail Organa because of the way that he was dressed. Like, you could kind of see the shoulder and stuff like that. The theories that are out there right now are 1 is Saw Gerrera, 2 is Bail, 3 is Darth Maul, believe it or not. And there was one other person. I think there was like a 4th guy, but those are basically kind of the big ones.
Okay.
And I think it's
I've heard
Bail.
Leia.
Yeah, it seemed male to me, though. And it would make sense because they're foreshadowing a little bit with Bail, and he would make sense because you also have to look and you have to think about what time period this is in. Now, if
it's right after Revenge of the Sith. It can't be Leia because it's right after Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah,
pretty much. So yeah, that rules Leia out. But it could be. And the other one I've heard is it could be Ahsoka.
Yeah, but again, you would see her, whatever those things are called.
I'm talking about,
one of the guys will chat it in. Yeah, they're called like the Leiku or something if they're Twi'leks. But she's technically
she's
the other one. So they're called something different. But you didn't see that. Plus, again, you got to go by the outfit. If you actually go back and watch that episode and you look, it's very, very Bail Organa-ish.
Okay.
And so I definitely think that that's probably where they're going. And I also think that it makes sense because this would be around the time period that Bail Organa was building things. Remember, by the time you see Rogue One, granted, they haven't all unified and basically come up with like, okay, we're now this unified rebellion against the Empire, and they all had similar ideologies, but they had different ways of getting to them. And you remember all the disagreements they had in Rogue One. It wasn't until the Battle of Scarif that they're like, okay, cool, right?
We got to do something, yeah.
And that was when they basically got everything together. But Bail, on the other hand, would make sense because he was one of the main guys with Mon Mothma that you're seeing pretty prominently in Rogue One. And he's got to have time to build this rebellion. So again, I just, that's my guess. Let's see.
Well, yeah, and that would be beneficial for that tactical droid. That information would be very beneficial for somebody like, maybe she's a Bothan.
Yeah, right. Ronaldo says,
died.
I agree. I think it's Bail Organa. And then he also says, Darth Maul, how? Well, I mean, I'll just put that out there before I get to the rest of these texts comments.
Message comments.
Right? See, the problem that I have with it being Darth Maul, and this is why I don't understand why people are thinking this. I mean, he kind of dresses very similarly throughout the whole thing. And remember that we're coming up on the Solo time period here. And he's still very much in kind of his black robe type garb thing that he had. And so if you look at the outfit that was at the end of this thing, it just, and also
it had more regalness to it.
Exactly. It was a little bit more regal and everything like that. It's not how Darth Maul would, I mean, unless he was just getting out of bed or something. I don't know. Maybe it was his night clothes. Who knows? But the thing is, from a story perspective, it doesn't make sense. Jason says that Bail Organa seems like the safe choice. Darth Maul is my gut reaction. Interesting. Ahsoka has the most evidence, but would be it would retcon a book. Which, yeah, I agree with that. Is that even though they're not above that, which is the topic for another episode about how they said, okay, everything's canon, and now we're going to start retconning things, but I don't think so. I agree. I think he's a safe choice. And then Ronaldo says, I don't think it's Ahsoka. This happens parallel to Clone Wars Season 7. Kind of. It's actually...
I think it's after.
Yeah, it's after. I mean, I know what he means, though, because Season 7 of Clone Wars does cover the events of Revenge of the Sith, and it does go a little bit after it to a degree, but I think that this is still, this is still kind of like a little bit too far after. Ronaldo says, other option could be Mon Mothma, which I believe you said, right, Daryl?
Yep.
And he says, Jason corrects him, says, no, this is after Revenge of the Sith. We see Palpatine's speech. Yes, see, good point. And this is when they're coming up with all the, hey, look, here's a data card that you got to have to get through, checkpoints and stuff. And so they've had some time to kind of get entrenched here. Jason says Mon Mothma would be a good option, too. And then Ronaldo says, I don't think it's Saw Gerrera either, considering we've seen him in previous episodes before. I don't think it would be a big surprise to see him again. That was what actually was throwing me from Saw Gerrera. If this were a little bit further into the Clone Wars time period, then I would say definitely yeah. And don't get me wrong, I know he's still around because we see him pop up in Rogue One. But
I mean, he popped up in Bad Batch. I mean, he was
he
like
did
in the first couple episodes.
Yes,
he was there in Bad Batch.
It could be. I mean, if I had to say, like, if I had to pick two, it would be either Bail or Saw. But just judging by the frame, I would almost have to say, yeah, it could be Bail or Mon Mothma. Just because of the way the outfit looked and the overall build, it just doesn't seem like it could be somebody like Saw Gerrera. Saw Gerrera is pretty big. And I think that we would notice that. But it's going to be really interesting to see where this is going, because like I said, I like the way that they're setting this up. I think that they're going to start dealing with some more macro issues now, that it's not just going to be focused on the Bad Batch as much, because obviously, yes, they have to do their character development. You have to see a little bit more with their relationship with Omega. You eventually have to see this also in the context of the fact that we have to figure out what Omega's importance is. And we don't know that yet. And it has to be beyond, even though, again, love this episode, and I really like what they've done with her. Like I said, they've given her a balance of competence, but yet naivete. When she was sitting out, she actually tried to sit out and just kind of do her job and look out for the tactical droid, but she was kind of brought into the action. It wasn't the typical kid disobeying the adult and doing it anyway. I mean, I think that they're really handling her character really well this time. Well, this time meaning the kid stereotype in Star Wars. But there's more to it than that, though. Because the Kaminoans want her back. Fennec Shand specifically targeted her. We have to figure out what's behind all this stuff. So I think that we're going to be in for a pretty wild ride. So to close this out, what were your favorite moments from the episode?
My favorite moments from the episode was I like the fact that, how they teamed up with each other. Like Tech and Trace kind of got together and kind of figured that out. And then, Rafa, and the rest of the guys, like when Wrecker finally does show up, he starts cleaning house like Wrecker does. She's like, oh yeah, I like him. Like the byplay between, her and Hunter was funny. I really enjoyed just the growth in Rafa and watching her grow. I think she's always that wild card that she kind of want on your team. She could be annoying, but at the same time, like you could tell she's committed, to certain things. And the fact that, I think she's really on the side of good at this point. She's not trying to be, underhanded in a way. So I'm just really kind of curious to see that.
All right. Well, we actually have somebody new chatting with us. Get Record, which I guess this fits right in, right? I think Echo teaching Omega how to use her bow was pretty wholesome.
Yeah, that was cool.
That was cool. And again, I think that if I were to sum up some of my favorite stuff, before I do, let me get Jason in there because he was saying my favorite was seeing Omega practice with the bow because I love cool bow characters. And as I pointed out,
all right, Legolas.
well, and actually, I think he was, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that when we were doing a while ago, we did this whole like top 5 weapons or something like that. Was this not one of the ones that you had brought up? Because I remember one of the things that I said earlier in this show tonight was I thought it was nice that we actually get to see kind of the laser version of the longbow, because we're so used to seeing the crossbow, right? The bowcaster, that even though we've seen this weapon, like I said before, this is featured fairly prominently. And one of the things that I loved, now getting into some of the stuff, that was one of my favorite scenes, hands down, was them trying to teach her to use the bow and just the whole overall thing. But it actually gets to what is one of my favorite things about this show, and that is the camaraderie, the comedy, because nothing is overdone and nothing is slapsticky or played for, or Panther Poodoo or Jar Jarisms or any of that stuff, right? It's pretty much very subtle, very organic, very natural,
comedy.
Realistic, right? Situation or circumstance-based comedy, which always has been the best thing in Star Wars. Lucas, of course, established it in the original trilogy, and I think that when they stick with that, it's a really winning formula. I too like the growth of the Martez sisters. When I first saw them, I was like, is that? And then I realized it was them. And I really like just the overall growth of a lot of the characters that they bring back, because you can tell that some time has passed and they've learned lessons. And even though we haven't seen those lessons presented anywhere like a comic or another series or anything, you can tell, you can feel the growth, you can feel the experience and the weatheredness and some of the things that happen. And I think that they did a really good job with that in this episode. And then finally, I really like the way that they're advancing the greater storyline by focusing on some of these smaller stories. Because usually what a series will do is they'll get all wrapped up in these crazy filler, stupid stories, like the one we always bring up in the Clone Wars, that stupid droid stranded thing.
Oh, yeah.
Where all those droids... And that thing went on for like 3 or 4 episodes. And you're like, okay, A,
enough of
I get it. And B, can we get back to, the actual Clone Wars now? One of the things that this show has been doing is it's giving you pieces of the bigger story through these smaller, more personal stories. And I think that that's one of the things that's really cool, is that you're getting these really personal storylines for each of these characters or groups of characters. But if you're really paying attention, they're a piece of that bigger puzzle. And then when they start to focus, like they did on this episode, on some elements of the greater storyline, you're like, oh, yeah, now I understand. And even just some of the little foreshadow stuff they do, right? Wrecker always complaining about his headaches. And then again, they went a little bit further when he kept saying, good soldier follows orders. The same thing that Crosshair was saying. I mean, they're giving you little bits and pieces of what's going on, and they're doing a brilliant job of foreshadowing this stuff without beating you over the head with it. Because that's what a lot of series tend to do. They tend to pretty much do the virtual version of shaking you by the neck and going, pay attention to this part. This is important, that kind of thing, right? They did this very, very organic, cool thing. And again, it feels natural. Some people might complain that some of the stuff is slow, but that's because that's life, guys. Life is slow. That's how it works. Not everything has to be nonstop action. And I think that it's funny because if you go back and look at all these movies from even 20 or 30 years ago, I'm not talking like the 40s, 50s. I mean, even like 70s, 80s, 90s even. They were slower. They would actually let us
Well,
see him breathe.
I'll even give you one better. I mean, even though the critically acclaimed Game of Thrones, you have like several episodes where you're not having like some big gigantic battle, but it's just kind of everything kind of building up to it. You kind of have the drama that ensues. So when the battle does happen, it carries more weight to it.
Yeah, it's like
And
a
that's
release.
you get a bigger payoff with it. Versus if it's like every 30 seconds you got a battle. It's like, okay.
Well, and I think that's what they're doing here too, is that they're giving you, because you can actually feel a lot of the dramatic tension. And again, I know some people, like I said, would probably look at us and watch this and go, wow, you guys really get all this out of this show, huh? This little cartoon? And yes, we do. That's why we're reviewing it. But it's also because it's there. It's there if you see it. And I think that there are some of the episodes, like I said, we're 6 episodes in. Even though I generally like all the episodes, and I think that they all succeed on some level, I will admit that there's certain parts of things that maybe they could have handled better, or where they basically were shooting for something and maybe they didn't quite get the way there. I don't think anything was a failure, but maybe not a resounding success. One of the things that Get Record said, referring to the sisters, was, yeah, they worked really well this time. And I think that that's also part of Filoni's growth as a director and as a storyteller. Because he's moving away. Remember, he started just being a 2D animator, and now he's moving on, and he's getting better at the storytelling. He's getting a little bit more Lucas-like there. And I think that that's a really good thing. So overall, I was really happy with this episode. I thought it was really good, and it did what all good episodic television should do. It made me not be able to wait until Friday.
Right. Leave you wanting more.
Definitely. Us wanting more. So I think that's going to pretty much wrap up our show for tonight. So be sure, if you guys like this at all, make sure you hit that like button, so that way it helps the channel out. Hit that subscribe button, because you're going to want to know when we're putting out all these videos. We stream live every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We might actually start throwing up a couple more videos, so you're definitely going to want to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you'll be aware of anything that's coming out. If you guys want to throw us even a little extra support, we're part of that Buy Me a Coffee program, but we call it the Blue Milk, so you can buy us a blue milk, throw a couple of dollars our way. It helps out the channel. And of course, Friday, now you said that you may not actually be here, right? You may not be able to make it.
Yeah, right.
All right, so I might actually do the show solo. So I haven't really, I haven't figured out what I'm going to talk about yet, but I'm going to talk about something cool, so you're not going to want to miss it. And then, of course, a week from tonight, next Monday's show, we're going to review the 5th comic, I believe it is, of the High Republic series. It's been a minute. In fact, the issue's been out for a little while, but, the Bad Batch came out, and then there's been all this other stuff that's happening, and we're like, man, we actually had to do it. So now we're going to get back into reviewing the High Republic series, because if you guys haven't had a chance to check it out, make sure you check it out. Go back and check out all of our reviews that we've done on episodes 1 through, or issues 1 through 4, so you're all caught up, because it really is a good comic series. So, you're not going to want to miss that. So I think with that, we're going to close it out for tonight. We hope to see you guys Friday night. And with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.